Now when Festus was come into the province, after 3 days he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. It is believed that the Apostle Paul wrote 4 of his epistles during the time he was in prison in Rome. The province that is being referred to is the province of Judea. At the time of his father's death, Herod Agrippa II was in Rome and only 17 years old. Therefore, Claudius Caesar did not think it wise to trust the government to Agrippa II, so he established governors or procurators to rule over provinces within the realm of Herod Agrippa I. This province of Judea referred to here was under the governorship of Porcius Festus. Then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul and besought him. This was 2 years after Paul's arrest in Jerusalem, yet these Jews were still loyal to Paul and desired favor against him that he would send for him to Jerusalem, laying wait in the way to kill him. This was the same plot that failed 2 years before. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly thither. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man if there be any wickedness in him. Jerusalem was located on a mountain, Mount Zion. Therefore everywhere was down from Jerusalem. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down unto Caesarea, and the day sitting on the judgment seat commanded Paul to be brought. Although Caesarea was north of Jerusalem, it was down in elevation. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about, and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. Paul had been in prison in Caesarea for more than 2 years, yet the Jews were still incensed at him. Paul was not just a passing evangelist who had been silenced by imprisonment. He had made disciples, not just converts, and the gospel was still spreading like wildfire, even though he was in prison. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar have I offended anything at all. During this imprisonment, Paul had testified to the multitude in Jerusalem, the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, and assembled of the chief priests and Jews in Caesarea before Felix, and to Felix and his wife Drusilla. Also reveals that were a number of times that Felix called for Paul and communed with him. This was Paul's 4th time in a little over 2 years to make these same arguments before these Jews. But Festus, willing to do the Jews the pleasure, answered Paul and said, Wilt thou go up to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these things before me? This would have been comparable to moving a trial back to a town where all the prospective jurors were members of the victim's family. There would have been no way to get a fair trial before these hypocritical Jews. Then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. Approximately 2 years before this, the Lord appeared to Paul and told him he would testify of him at Rome. For if I be an offender, or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar. Paul was not afraid of death. Being afraid of death makes us susceptible to intimidation and manipulation, which brings bondage. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, Hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Unto Caesar shalt thou go. The right of a Roman citizen to appeal to Caesar was a sacred thing. Any magistrate who disregarded an appeal to Caesar would suffer the severest condemnation of the Roman government. And after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came unto Caesarea to salute Festus. The Agrippa spoken of here was commonly called King Agrippa II, to distinguish him from his father, King Agrippa I. This was the last of the 5 Herods mentioned in the Bible. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's cause unto the king, saying, There is a certain man left in bonds by Felix. Paul had ministered to Lysias, the Roman captain in Jerusalem, Felix and Festus, who were Roman governors, and here to King Agrippa II. Bernice became the mistress of Titus, who eventually became the Roman emperor. This brought the claims of the gospel to the highest levels of the Roman government, about whom, when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against them. To whom I answered, It is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die, before that he which is accused have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. Festus was making himself look good, when in truth he was willing to bow to the demands of the Jews and transport Paul to Jerusalem for a mock trial or death along the way. Neither Festus nor his predecessor Felix had done justice to Paul, but Festus was portraying himself as an impartial judge. He wasn't. Therefore, when they were come hither, without any delay on the morrow, I sat on the judgment seat, and commanded the man to be brought forth, against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusation of such things as I supposed. Festus found out that Paul hadn't committed any civil crimes. All the accusations against Paul were of a religious nature over which Festus didn't have any authority. He should have let Paul go, but had certain questions against him of their own superstition, and of one Jesus which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. This clearly reveals that the resurrection of Jesus was the central point of Paul's preaching. And because I doubted of such manner of questions, I asked him whether he would go to Jerusalem and there be judged of these matters. It's more probable that Festus was just like his predecessor Felix, who was showing the Jews favor for his own political advantage. But when Paul had appealed to be reserved unto the hearing of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I might send him to Caesar. The name Augustus means venerable, and was a title for the Roman emperors, much like the title Caesar. It was first conferred on Gaius Octavius in 27 BC and became commonly known as Caesar Augustus. After his death, the title Augustus continued to be used of the succeeding Roman emperors. Then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would also hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, thou shalt hear him. This King Herod Agrippa II was the son of King Herod Agrippa I, who killed James and tried to kill Peter. Agrippa I was the one who was smitten by the angel of the Lord in Acts 12:23 because he accepted the people's worship as a god and didn't give God the glory. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing, with the chief captains and principal men of the city, at Festus's commandment, Paul was brought forth. How vain is it to worship and honor men who dishonor God! I'm sure all the arrogance makes King Agrippa's punishment in hell even more agonizing. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, ye see this man, about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought to not live any longer. Paul had made a huge impact on the world, and his reputation was big, but it was said of Paul that his bodily presence was weak. I'm sure Paul didn't appear to Agrippa as impressive as the stories that were told of him. Paul wasn't the force that had turned the world upside down. It was God living through him. But when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him. Festus knew that Paul wasn't guilty. If he would have done what was right, he would have released Paul, and Paul wouldn't have been constrained to appeal unto Caesar. Paul later said he was constrained to appeal unto Caesar, of whom I have no certain thing to write unto my Lord. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, and specially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination had I might have somewhat to write. There wasn't even enough evidence against Paul to write an indictment, yet Paul had been unjustly imprisoned for over 2 years. For it seemeth to be unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him. It should have seemed unreasonable to keep a Roman prisoner locked up for over 2 years when there was no justification for it. Festus had a very selective conscience.